So I am writing and thinking a lot about pride and what pride is, because the way we use it now has moved quite a long way, and we generally use it as a positive, and there's good reasons for that. You know, black pride, the I am proud of you that we say to someone that we love. Mm-hmm. You know, but throughout the history of my tradition, theologians have talked about pride as something deadly, as something that separates us from each other and from God and our full humanity. And reading your book helped crystallize, I think that's the language I would put mm-hmm. to the problem that you're so wisely and kindly going after. I hope that we are God in some way, you know, our desire not to need help, not to need others, not to be woundable, mm-hmm. not to be vulnerable. And just how kind of tender and foolish and completely understandable and destructive mm-hmm. it is in us. I want to try something on you, which is related but not directly. But as I was reading your books, it really clarified for me where I think Christianity has a slightly different response, mm-hmm. because particularly in the antidote, or that comes up a lot in 4,000 Weeks as well, forgive me, I'm going to narrate something and you can push back on me, but it felt to me like you were starting from a place that we all start, or maybe you were saying we all start from this place, also me, of a deep anxiety and fear that about much of the world, and I share it, particularly now. But that you went looking for medicines for it. And Stoicism medicine is to say, if you just change your beliefs about what life should be about, you won't suffer so much. You know, if you can just almost lower your expectations mm-hmm. or become very sanguine about the things that happen to you, you won't suffer, so you won't carry fear. And I'm going to bodge this, but from my understanding, the kind of Buddhism approach is really this kind of non-attachment. We just need to detach from the things that we long for, detach from our fears, just get enough distance to see that the world and our thoughts can kind of pass us by, but we can remain tranquil, we can remain steady. And there's the Eckhart Tolle thing of the self. And, mm-hmm. and as I was reading this, I realized that I think I used to be technically a Christian, but temperamentally a Stoic, because I had internalized one verse in the Bible where Paul says, I have learned to be the same in any circumstances, right. in poverty or riches, in oppression or people lording me.
Very Stoic thought, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and obviously he read and knew this work. The New Testament is in conversation with these ideas, right? They thread together, they're not separable. But I had come to think that being a real Christian was someone who was very tranquil and unbothered and not anxious, mm-hmm. because I had the peace that passes understanding, and you know, Jesus had taken away my sins, and holiness was emotional steadiness. Mm-hmm. But I now don't think that. I think the Christian response to the deep fear and the deep anxiety of being a fallible human person in the world, and that temptation of pride, is not to feel less but to feel more. Mm-hmm. And that when the New Testament talks about sin, it talks about hard-heartedness, and it talks about, their hearts were hardened. And we see anger and sadness in the person of God, in Jesus, in others. Forgive me, this is a much more theological digression than I intended to do, but that it takes a very different approach. It says the way to deal with the pain of being a person is to be continually processing it through these stories, to continually be following the drama of Scripture, to be in the rhythm of the liturgy, which shapes time mm-hmm. and takes you through Good Friday and back to Easter, and through Good Friday and back to Easter, and stops your heart getting hard. But I'm definitely less happy than I was. Yeah. And the pull to deal with anxiety about human limits by having non-attachment is so appealing, because I want not to be angry about injustice, and I want not to be grieving about the climate, but I increasingly think that is a form of escape for me.